Charlotte Regionals were this past weekend, and it ended up being the largest Pokemon tournament of all time. The big story from the event was the triumphant return of one Wolf Glick. But let's face it, I'm not Wolf Glick, and chances are if you're watching this video, you aren't either. When you or I go to one of these huge events, chances are we won't win. But that doesn't mean we'll leave without a great story. At my last tournament, Nasty Plot Heatproof Sinistcha was able to guide me to a 5th placed finish, my best ever result. Obviously, that's the team I'd bring to my next major event, perhaps with 1 or 2 minor adjustments, right? Wrong. You see, in the 2 months since my last event, everything in the competitive Pokemon landscape had changed. A new rule set had been released, meaning previously unavailable Mons were now legal. Incineroar, the strongest VGC Pokemon ever released, was unshackled from its Pokemon home prison. Incineroar's Fire Dark typing resisted both Sinistcha's stab moves, and was able to threaten even Heatproof Sinistcha with a punishing knockoff. The rest of the team didn't fare any better. Raging Bolt, the newly released Paradox form of Raikou, was given the powerful new move, Thunderclap, a priority electric move with the ability to one-shot my Choice Scarf Urshifu before it had the chance to attack. These 2 extremely common, relevant threats single-handedly checked more than half of my team. If I wanted to find success in Charlotte, I would have to build a new team from scratch. Thankfully, I would have help. Kay, a friend from my local VGC scene, had already crafted a team that hard-countered the best team from the most recent tournament. Kay, Sharpie, and I made some minor adjustments, and the team was ready to go for Charlotte. Gouging Fire is the undisputed star of this team. With a speed boost to start the battle, thanks to its held item Booster Energy and its ability Photosynthesis, our ancient flaming dinosaur dog friend is able to outpace opposing threats, reducing their attack. Or, against more passive leads, it can howl to raise the attack of itself and its partner. The only issue is, my opponent in round 1 has Tailwind. If you look at my full team, its most glaring weakness is a lack of Tailwind or Trick Room as a form of speed control. If an opponent commits to a form of speed control, I am forced to play more passively, relying on Bulk, Protects, and Reads to stall out opposing speed control and make progress. This more balanced, defensive style of play is something I'm not super comfortable with. I've gotten really positive results at the events I've attended, but my first Pokemon Regional was less than a year ago. I've never brought a team without Tailwind to a major event, and in round 1, I can't get a grip on the matchup. In games 1 and 2, I target down my opponent's Tornadus immediately, forcing a turn 1 Tailwind that I'm able to stall out. I take game 1, but my opponent gets some key plays correct game 2. In game 3, my opponent adjusts, and I find myself on the back foot. This time they don't lead Tornadus, instead opting for an Ogerpon Chi-Yu lead. With some smart play, my opponent chips my team enough so that when Tornadus finally enters the field, I don't have enough resources to stall out Tailwind. They take the set in 3. Thankfully, my next opponent was running Psyspam, a fantastic matchup for my team. With Kingambit and Xianpao, I have 2 immunities to Psychic, and a way to remove terrain. Furthermore, my opponent's lack of relevant speed control means I don't have to worry about stalling out Tailwind, and I lose the set in 2. My opponent played well, I got the leads wrong in both games, and I misread my opponent's team sheet thinking their Choice Scarf Arcanine was instead Choice Bandit. It was a fantastic matchup on paper, and while my opponent played flawlessly, it was a very tough defeat to swallow. The question started creeping in. Am I any good at this game? Was my prep for the tournament serious enough? Was it worth it flying all the way down to Charlotte? Kay, the main builder of the team, started the tournament in good spirits. They were 1-1 after a tight loss to James Evans. But for the rest of my group, the mood was pretty dire. My friend Kyle asked me, what mentality do we bring to the next game? How do we pick ourselves up from being 0-2? Unfortunately, there's no good answer to that question. I told Kyle that my goal was no longer advancing in the tournament. Instead, I'd focus on learning to play my team as best as possible and having fun talking to my competitors about Pokemon. I'd be lying if I said that made me feel any better. My round 3 opponent was running Archaludon Rain, an extremely scary matchup for my team. Thankfully, my opponent only had 1 powder immunity, meaning Amoonguss should be able to control the game with Spore. After an unfortunate turn 1 crit and some crucial reads by my opponent, I find myself 1 loss away from being eliminated from the entire tournament at the earliest possible juncture. Thankfully, I'm able to keep a level head. I'm just here to have fun, right? Amoonguss dodges a crit in subsequent games, and I let out a sigh of relief. 1 and 2, I'm finally on the board. In round 4, I go up against the Dragonite, Chien-Pao, Entei this team was designed to beat. I take the set in 2 games, grab some lunch, and overall, feel a whole lot better. In order to advance in the tournament starting 0-2, I would need to win 7 consecutive matches. I was now 5 wins away, but I knew each round my opponents would get tougher and tougher. I let go of the big picture and just took it 1 game at a time. Round 5, Game 3. I'm at the advantage. With Choice Specs Dazzling Gleam, I'm able to knock out the opposing Flutter, turning the game into a 2 versus 1. My Amoonguss is Tera Fairy, and with Rage Powder, is able to completely wall the opponent's Raging Bolt. Fairy is immune to Dragon, and Thunderclap only works if the opponent's Pokemon attacks that turn. Rage Powder allows Amoonguss to draw in both attacks, causing both to fail. Sounds like a guaranteed win, right? Well, not quite. My opponent, through the use of Protect, Calm Mind, and Leftovers, is able to PP stall my Fluttermane's Dazzling Gleam. With Choice Specs, my Fluttermane can't switch moves and is forced to struggle. KOing my opponent's Raging Bolt is now all but impossible. With Leftovers Recovery and Calm Mind boosts, my Flutter and Amoonguss no longer have the damage output to take out the Sauropod. Thankfully, they don't have to. My opponent's strategy took so long that the 20-minute battle timer expired. Since I had more Pokemon remaining, I won the game. My Amoonguss was at high enough HP that my opponent was 6 or 7 turns away from winning the tiebreaker. It was tense, but my knowledge of VGC timer rules allowed me to play it safe and win the round. In round 6, I again went up against Dragonite, Entei, Chien-Pao priority spam. My team was built to defeat this sort of team, and I was able to win 2 games to reach 4-2. The next set went to 3 games, but Tera Fairy Amoonguss was able to limit the opponent's Urshifu Dark, allowing me to take the set. 5-2. 2 rounds remained, and I was about to face my most difficult match of the entire day. In round 8, I was paired up against Archaludon Rain. Archaludon's ability, Stamina, allows it to boost its defense after each hit. My team is mostly physical attackers, meaning I have to rely exclusively on Chien-Pao's Sacred Sword and Fluttermane's special attacks to pressure Archaludon. Urshifu Water's Surging Strikes in Rain can deal tons of damage to all of my team, except for Amoonguss and Ogerpon, neither of which wants to take a Pelipper Hurricane on the follow-up. Basically, my team has answers for Archaludon Rain, but I have to bring those 4 Mons and outposition my opponent such that I can check their threats both defensively and offensively. It was one of my scariest matchups going into Charlotte. Game 1. My opponent leads Urshifu Pelipper into my Ogerpon Fluttermane. A Surging Strikes would knock out my Fluttermane in a single hit, likely costing me the game. But Ogerpon has access to the move Follow Me and the ability Water Absorb. The safe play is to use Follow Me and attack with Fluttermane, but that opens the door to my opponent doubling up on Ogerpon for the easy KO. I decide that my opponent wouldn't risk hitting into Ogerpon with Surging Strikes, getting nothing from the turn. Their Urshifu moves first, and it U-turns into Ogerpon! Hornleech and Dazzling Gleam combine to pick up the KO on Pelipper, putting me into the lead. Unfortunately, the free switch allows my opponent to position Archaludon and Amoonguss together in a way that is difficult for me to deal with. My opponent maneuvers his remaining Mons well, and is able to just barely clinch Game 1. It's gut-wrenching to lose the game after starting so well. It's a difficult matchup, and I've given myself a mountain to climb in order to stay in the tournament. Game 2 starts, same leads. Do I go for the same read again? Last match, my opponent saw that I didn't respect the option of a turn 1 Surging Strikes. Do they make the same play, or do they switch things up? This time, I follow me. The opponent's Urshifu terastallizes grass. The Surging Strikes! I get the call correct! I deal massive damage to both Mons, and my Ogerpon lives the incoming Hurricane. I'm able to KO both the next turn and quickly even the set. Game 3. Archaludon Urshifu against Fluttermane Amoonguss. One play I have is to Rage Powder and attack with Fluttermane, but both Urshifu and Archaludon can Tera Grass to get around this. Alternatively, I could swap out Fluttermane for Ogerpon to absorb a Surging Strikes, but considering what happened last game, will my opponent commit to a Surging Strikes turn 1 again? The turn commences. I don't switch, and I don't Rage Powder. Neither of the opponent's Pokemon Tera. Urshifu U-turns into Amoonguss! This lets Fluttermane get off a huge Dazzling Gleam before it goes down to Heavy Slam. I put the Archaludon to sleep, giving me a huge lead. Next turn, Chien-Pao KOs the Pelipper while I switch into Ogerpon. Their final Pokemon is sent out, and to my surprise it's not Amoonguss, but Landorus Incarnate. My opponent likely assumed that since my Ogerpon had enough bulk to live Pelipper's Hurricane in Game 2, it wouldn't have enough speed to outpace their Landorus. But I knew my defensive EVs came at the expense of attack, not speed. My opponent's Landorus Tera poisons defensively, but I Tera Ogerpon for extra damage. With Rain, Sword of Ruin, and Tera, I am able to one-shot the Landorus, and Sacred Sword does more than half to Duraludon. I recognize that I now have a guaranteed path to victory, and I clinch the set. I have now gone from 0-2 to 6-2, winning 6 sets on the bounce. One more victory, and I advance in the tournament. My final opponent has a super dangerous Tailwind team, featuring Smeargle. But there's actually not a whole lot to say about this one. In both games 1 and 2, I make aggressive reads turn 1 and am able to take out Tornadus. In both games, I hold on to my lead and take the set. My round 9 opponent is a super talented player and team builder. In fact, their brother made top 8 with the exact same team. I just played aggressively and got lucky enough to put both games to bed quickly. Against all odds, I had won 7 elimination matches in a row and made it to day 2 of the competition. I performed alright in the second day of competition, finishing 48th, but I was really proud of how I bounced back on day 1 of the tourney. I proved to myself that I can succeed using a variety of team structures, and that I can still consider myself a strong competitor, even if I'm on a losing streak. Kay played extremely well, but faced a lot of tough opponents, just barely missing out on day 2. Chirpy and Kyle bounced back from their rocky starts to secure winning records as well. The fact of the matter is, when you or I go to a Pokemon Regional, we are going to lose. That's not what defines us. What defines us is how we respond. Wait! If you made it to the end of this video, you're going to like my other series, Roulette to Ranked, where I take randomized Pokemon to the top of the VGC ranked ladder. This is a really small channel right now, so please be sure to like and subscribe. If it didn't help, I wouldn't ask. Bye!